Hey guys, so my name's Katie, and if you've clicked on this video, chances are you probably know what endometriosis is, or you've seen our Instagram account and that's what's brought you here. Endo Silence Scotland, check it out. If you have just clicked on this by chance, well, we're going to talk about periods, so settle in. Basically, I just thought that I would make a little explainer video about number one, what endo is, number two, my sort of journey with endo and what has brought us here and where I'm at. So let's go. Endometriosis is a condition that affects 1 in 10 women worldwide, which is about 190 million people with this condition, which is mind-blowing. It's the second most common gynecological condition in the UK. And yeah, it affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways, which is kind of one of the reasons why it's so difficult to diagnose. The symptoms of endo are vast and varied, but they largely kind of fall under the categories of everything people don't want to talk about. So I'm talking heavy periods, debilitating pain during sex, agonising monthly cramps, and they can even affect your sort of bowel function as well. So every single taboo we've got in there. I mean, it's great. It's not for the faint-hearted, basically. If you have endo, you better be prepared to talk about periods, poo and sex. Endometriosis occurs when cells that replicate those that line the uterus are found basically in the wrong place. So they grow and attach themselves to various organs and cause a really sort of sticky, awful mess inside of you. Every time you ovulate, where that blood would naturally sort of drain away, these cells stick in there, they've got nowhere to go, and they form cysts, endometriomas, or just really create painful masses inside. And the blood, as you can imagine, every time you have a period or you ovulate will sort of build up and fill the tank more and more, which is why we really need to tackle this issue of early diagnosis so that hopefully, you know, we're working with a lot less trauma basically at the end of the day. 9 times out of 10, you do actually need that operation to fully diagnose endo, or at the very least just to see how bad it is or where it's hiding. You could have all these agonising symptoms every single month, and a scan could show up and they could go, oh, actually, there's nothing wrong with you. When you know you are not going crazy, you are not a hypochondriac, you're not making it up. There's something there, and so they have to open you up and take a look. So yeah, if you have any of these symptoms, then please don't take no for an answer. Go to your GP, request to be seen, request to be heard, and don't let them just fob you off and say, no, darling, this is just something every woman goes through. If I had like £1 for every time someone had told me, you've just got it bad, sweetheart, or, you know, periods hurt everyone, or you'll grow out of it, take a paracetamol, well, maybe my body would be a little bit less of a mess. So that draws us nicely onto me and my situation. So I had painful periods. Well, I got my period quite young, so I was about 12, 11, 12, and it was not a bother really, it was fine. And I was actually put on the pill quite early because I had quite bad acne. I say quite bad, it was at the time catastrophic and the worst thing in the world. So they put me on the pill quite young, and I suppose that might have actually sort of limited the spread of what I now know to be endo, because my periods really gave me very little bother until I came off that pill when I was about 16. And then, yeah, my periods just started to become a real issue for me. I would sort of negotiate my lifestyle around these 3 days out of the month where I knew I was going to be, you know, cooped up in bed in serious pain, with heavy bleeding, agony, migraines, you know, the kind of cramping pain that makes you unable to move and function, the pain that is so bad that it makes you black out and vomit. So that was just regular old period for me, and you know, I'm not some shy, retiring wallflower. I did speak up and talk to people about it. I talked to my peers, my family members, and for all the love in the world, it wasn't that they didn't care. It was just, well, you've got it bad, darling. Like, you've just got a bad case of something every woman goes through. Well, we know now that it wasn't that, but that's enough to shut you up. It's enough to make you think, okay, right, well, I should just be able to get on with this. What is wrong with me? And this continued all the way from high school right the way through to university. And I just kind of developed this coping strategy. Don't get me wrong, I did go to the doctors and I did get told just take some ibuprofen. I tried out different pills in my lifetime, but mainly I was just told, that's it, that's your luck. But in my kind of 4th year of university, I had an amazing setup actually. I was living with my closest pals. There was 4 of us in the flat and it was just amazing. And I always say, like, for us, there was no subject that was off the table. And we didn't really talk about menstruation, despite the fact that we all had actually, well, most of us had some sort of gynae issues. And when this was all happening with me, it was that way, you know, I was in the most supportive setting in the world, but still we didn't really have any answers. In my final year of university, gained about 2.5 stone, just in time for the graduation pictures. Lovely. Still ban them from being put up in the house because I cannot stand them. Just because I knew something was wrong, but I'd also started working in a cafe. So I think that everybody just thought that I was like snacking on the pastries in the back when no one was there. And obviously, if you work in a cafe, things sort of tend to land, you know, in your mouth and you do end up eating. But I knew that this wasn't it, because from about the June of my final year of university to the September, so just after graduation, great, my weight started to plummet. So I hadn't changed anything about my habits. I was still very much a student, still very much drinking, and still very much eating all the wrong things, just making all those mistakes that we all make. But I knew that this wasn't because of that, because like that hadn't changed. But during this period from about the June to September, like I say, I started to vomit maybe 6 or 7 times a day, which caused me, like, obviously to lose a crap ton of weight. So I lost like 2 stone in that time, and I did feel good because I was fitting into clothes that I hadn't fit in for ages, when I was feeling bloated and sore and bigger than I should have been for my, you know, my BMI. My ideal was 100%. I was spilling over that and it was not good, didn't feel good to me. So I was starting to feel quite happy, although I knew that in order to get this way I was being severely ill, and it was a knee-jerk reaction to this pain in my abdomen that I couldn't shake. Pain that felt the same way that I felt for those 3 days every month, that had sort of just started there on to linger and become a daily issue that was 20 times worse when I did actually have my period. So it was when I lost over the 2 stone, I was like, right, your denial has lasted too long, you need to get yourself to the doctor. So I went to the doctor and I said, look, I've lost all this weight. And the first thing that the doctor actually said to me was, is it intentional? And I was like, what? I was really, really upset by that, because I was like, for goodness sake, you can see I've presented with problems like this for ages. It's worse on my period. This pain is lingering and I am physically, you know, incapable of stopping myself from vomiting all the time. It's really debilitating. Something has to be done. So I pushed there and got referred for my first gynae appointment. So this all went on, got my first scan eventually, and then my gynecologist sort of mentioned, oh, have you heard of endometriosis? No, what is that? And explained to me what the condition was, how common it was, which was baffling to me, that I, you know, growing up in an all-female household, someone who is really super, well, tries to be super engaged with women's health and women's issues, and, well, you know, just has bits that are, you know, I should have known about this and have always had bad periods. Anyway, so I didn't have a clue about endo, but she told me a little bit about that there. And yeah, then I got my scan. actually, weirdly, that night my mum had to come through from Aberdeen because I ended up having my period and being taken to A&E. So this sort of also had become part of my typical procedure. I would sort of end up in out of hours hospitals or A&E waiting rooms sort of demanding morphine or diclofenac injections simply to get through the pain. So my mum, bless her, it's like a 3-hour journey, and she came through to Glasgow and took me to the doctors, where they actually gave me the results of my scan there, and they said, oh look, there's a couple of cysts here on your ovaries. And I was like, well now, that is the most terrifying thing I've ever been told about my own body. Okay, so 2 cysts on my ovaries, what's the plan? Got the next gynae appointment in another month, I think it was, just for a chat, just chatting about what might happen, potential surgery, all this stuff, and I was quite flabbergasted. Anyway, then they took a blood test, and the blood test was the CA125, and my levels were abnormally high. This was really scary because this is also the test that they take to determine whether someone might have the signs of ovarian cancer. So I was like super freaking out, but the doctor did say it's likely to be a result of these endometriomas that we can see. So there I was pretty much diagnosed with endo because I have the endometriomas, which, you know, usually don't just appear on their own. There's usually endo in other places. So I was sent for an MRI. The MRI came back and showed that I was actually in there for like 2 hours, which is terrifying because I'm quite claustrophobic, and I was like, this is like blast off. I feel like I'm gonna take off into space any minute. But anyway, the MRI showed up that I had, the existing cysts had grown by 3 to 4 centimeters each. I'd got another cyst on my right ovary, and my there was fluid in my pouch of Douglas. In between all these scans, what basically happened was I was studying for postgrad, and I was going to uni, and I was blacking out and having to come home, and basically eventually after Christmas I like wasn't able to move anymore. So at this point I'd kind of abandoned the postgrad, which I've picked up again now, and was home, and I'd been at home for about a month, unable to move, unable to leave the house, apart from to go to the shops, all because I was on my period now. Like, I just thought I was the most ridiculous person. So actually every time the doctor was telling me, oh wait, you know, this could be something else, I felt really weirdly vindicated. I was like, thank goodness something is wrong with me, because this cannot be normal. So I'd already been housebound for about a month, and I already have had to, you know, sacrifice my dream in my head of becoming a journalist because I'd had to drop out of this course. I felt extremely helpless, and they were saying, oh, actually, we're not going to see you until, you know, a few months' time for the operation, and I cannot function. So I phoned my surgeon secretary every single day until I got a date in April. So it was moved a little bit earlier. Which was actually game-changing because my cysts had already grown in between scans. I don't know what kind of a mess we'd have seen, you know, had the surgery gone forward as late as they were initially wanting it to be. And, you know, my team, my mum and Neil came and sat by the bedside afterwards, and then my doctor came over and said, so this is the most severe case of endometriosis I've seen in a person of your age ever. Great. So stage 4, and loads of adhesions, you know, clearly a cyst that had ruptured. Historically, he did say that it had clearly gotten worse over the last sort of year, because a lot of the scarring was like new and a lot of the blood was new, which actually did correspond with my coming off the pill and my pain becoming completely unbearable. So that made sense to me. He said he drained the cysts and sort of flushed them out, but he didn't cut anything away yet. And actually we had quite a candid conversation about it before, being like, please, please, please don't cut anything unless you absolutely need to. But what he did find was that my right fallopian tube was enlarged to the same size as my womb. They should not be that big, so really, really enlarged. They did that test with the dye to see if they could get any fluid through, and nothing was getting through those tubes. But he said that the ovaries looked okay. Obviously now I know that because the cysts were drained, there would be a little bit of damage there. Or a lot, don't know. And yeah, that my bowel was fused to my uterus. My bowel was fused to my uterus. So like pretty gruesome news to wake up to. But he was weirdly optimistic. And that's when I was put on my course of Decapeptyl injections, Lupron, menopause injections, whatever you want to call them. So I've had 3 of those injections, so every 3 months you get another lot. And my pain is massively decreased, obviously. I'm on the menopause sort of side effects, which are not great, but I take the HRT patches, swap them out twice a week, and my quality of life has like rocketed. The idea of being put on the menopause was basically so that I couldn't ovulate, because in theory, if you can't ovulate or you don't get your period, there's no, you know, it can't get any worse. So hopefully the idea was that the tubes would start to calm down and decrease in size. And yeah, I was really on board with this plan, because, but also if they need to take the tubes out, take them out, that's fine, because I'd rather not have anything else that the endo can attach to. But if they're smaller, that's great, that's better for everyone. Brilliant, he was straight up amazing. He literally said, what's your concern? And I said, well, that no one's looked inside me since my operation. What if things aren't improving? What if this has all been a hopeless case of trial and error? And he said, right, let's go, let's get an internal scan right now. So he was brilliant, put me on the table, kind of did the scan, and took ages to find my ovaries. Yeah. And for that my bowel was like really, really clogged, and that would explain some of my breakthrough pain, possibly the pain's just coming from my bowel, because I had the coil fitted. Should have said this is all a mess. Should have said that. Got my coil fitted during surgery as well, so the coil was still there doing its job. But my bowel was totally clogged with crap, literally, and that could have been the pain and the pain that I was experiencing. But my fallopian tube that was really super enlarged was still enlarged, although only to the size of like a finger as opposed to a womb. Now I don't know how big a womb really is, but presumably when it's not got a child inside it, it's quite small. But it was still, the finger size was still quite big for a fallopian tube, so still he said that probably would have to come out. Couldn't even see the other one. So yeah, the scan was helpful because it shows me that something has been working and that the endometriomas haven't started to refill. Yeah, and actually the best thing about that appointment was that after the scan, he took me through and said, now what else are you worried about? Because we need to sort this out and not have you panicking, because you're young and we've got it young, and we can work together and we can prioritize this and try not to be too paranoid. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I do understand what you're saying, but also I just need to know, like, I'm the type of person that needs to know exactly what is going to happen so that I can kind of convince myself that it's going to be okay, or look into alternatives and do whatever I need to do. So he set me up with a referral for a fertility specialist, because I want to get my AMH blood test, and I want to work out how many eggs we're dealing with, what the quality of those eggs are, whether I need to start freezing them now. And if you want, I will do a vlog style video following that process as soon as I get my appointment, because I know that a lot of people are desperate to know this information, myself included. I know I'm only 23, but let's start freezing them now at 23 if it makes them more viable later. You know, I want that option. So that was amazing. And all this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't kind of pushed for it. Please pick this up as well and have a little paw through it. It's brilliant. It's written by Professor Andrew Horn from Expect in Edinburgh, so Scottish again, amazing, and Carol Pearson from Endometriosis UK. And it's just my little Bible. So when I was going through diagnosis, waiting for surgery, I, you know, went through this and highlighted the whole thing and fobbed it and did all I needed to do. Basically just, you know, just vandalised the thing. But it's got hints and tips for having a laparoscopy, which is great, and you should definitely look into that before you do have the surgery. More just for peace of mind, because it's really not that bad, usually. and it sort of debunks the traditional myths about endo, you know, have a baby and you'll be cured. Have a hysterectomy, you'll be cured. Right, there is no cure, so yeah, I hope that was helpful, and I hope it's not going to be too much of a nightmare for me to edit, because I have been speaking for like over half an hour. Once you get going with this, it's like you remember all the different things that you should have said that you didn't say, and I'm sure I've missed out so much stuff from my endo journey thus far. But things that I want to do is I want to get a fertility video up there soon when I have had my experience with the fertility doctor. I might start doing vlog style things sort of following that. Also, I want to do hints and tips for laparoscopy and answer the Q&A questions that you guys sent me on Instagram. If you have any more questions, please do send them in to Endo Silence Scotland. Good luck, guys.